Hey everybody, I have restarted this tutorial about 15 times because each time I forget to cover something more basic. So if I do that and I gloss over something and you're a little bit confused or I don't explain it properly, please let me know. It's really hard to know how much to include so that you don't bore people that have a little experience, but also include everything for the absolute beginners so that they know what the heck I'm talking about. Anyway, this is a spline, and remember, I do put in a table of contents, so if you already know what a spline is, then you can feel free to skip this to the next lesson. Let's talk about a spline. So it has a start point and an end point and a middle point by default. To actually get into the spline, this is you're not actually touching the spline, you're just hovering over the main transform group coordinates. So in order to actually touch the spline, you click on either the S or the E. And you don't have to be exact. You see how if I click there at the E, it'll still hit the E. As long as you're close to the spline, you will hit that point. Anyway, you want to look for the blue dot. You don't want to touch the red dot. We'll get to what the red dot is later, but right now just worry about touching the blue dots. And the basic controls for a spline are you have your origin and then an endpoint, and you can move them around like this, right? Remember, you have your control B function. So if I want the spline to come down here, I press control B and then I left click, and there is the spline right there. Another neat trick, if you are hovering above terrain and press page down, it will automatically set it on the next lower object. And that is something really good to do and know. Another thing is the left and right mouse buttons cycle through your points. If you press the up key, it goes to your start point. If you press the down key, it goes to your end point. And then insert, let's actually go back here. Insert creates a new spline position, and then obviously delete will delete them. So right now we are back to only 2 points, and let's do insert to create a third. Let's leave this one right there in the middle of the road, and then we will drag this one up here. There we go, control B. Now, if you are wondering about where did our line go, it's actually underneath the terrain because of it kind of follows a curve of best fit if you think from math class. So actually, one of the things that you have to do is you have to kind of get in here and create a few points in between to kind of make that curve go. And this is getting a little bit more into traffic splines. I don't want to really get into traffic splines now. I can cover that in another tutorial. This, the traffic splines are basically after you finish making the map, but I want to show you the very basic of splines just so you understand what they are. And then the final thing is, I think just about every spline that you use in the game, unless I'm mistaken, has to be closed. And the way that you can open and close the spline is by pressing the O key. And you see there, here, that's a little bit confusing. Let me make a little bit more of a circle. And there we go. So let's go over here. So there we go. Now we have an awesome circle. And let's press the O key. And you can see that it closes the gap there between the start and the end point. And okay, well, I guess maybe we will cover traffic splines real quick. Actually, to do that, I'll cover that real quick now just by looking at my other map, and then I'll cover traffic splines more in detail at the end when I'm finishing up this map. So let's jump to my other map here. Let's look over here. This will be good. So here we have an intersection, and we have, with this intersection, let's click on traffic splines. Now, the first lesson is this is with everything, not necessarily just with traffic splines. If you toggle visibility on a parent, it will toggle visibility on and off for the children. So each of these individual children have visibility checked on. You don't need to toggle visibility on or off. The reason why you want to do this is if I leave all those splines on, you will actually see the splines. It will look just like this in game, and that's a little bit ugly, so you don't want that. After you get done editing your splines, just toggle visibility on the parent. There we go. But now let's toggle visibility on so we can actually see the spline, and then let's find one. Now, if you notice, these splines do not have a closed loop, but the loop at a whole is closed. And by that, here's what I mean. So here is the actual spline, right? That's the start point of the spline. And it goes off the edge of the map, and then it basically links up right there with with another point of another spline. So it goes from start to end, right? That's the S, that's the E, and then this spline over here, if I zoom in a little bit more and I click off to the side, it will grab that S of the other spline. And then so it goes S to E. And this is how you can make nice traffic on a map without having to make one set closed loop from start to finish. And if you notice, those points are right there, right next to each other. And they do have to be really close for it to recognize it as one spline. So one of the things you can do, like I say, is you can raise it above and press page down. However, sometimes by doing that page down thing, it will actually keep it up in the air a little bit, like here, because it recognizes that. Here, let's maybe see if we can make it happen. No, I don't think we can do it. But sometimes it'll recognize this other spline as, you know, an object, and it'll actually set it up there. So the easiest thing that I like to do is, you have to look at this from multiple angles. I like to go off to the side on the road, right? The road should be flat. Oops, I accidentally clicked something else. So raise it up and then press page down. And now you know it's level on this surface, so your eyes will not play tricks on you. Zoom in kind of right above it, and then go left and right and kind of match it up, and there you go. Now, real quick, a few more lessons. If you have problem with precision zooming in and out or moving around, the plus and minus button on your number pad, if you look in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, that affects my movement speed. I covered this in my very basic intro, but just as a reminder, it sometimes really helps to go all the way down to 1, so you can get really, really close, really easy to the spline for maneuvering that thing around. Anyway, let's see, I guess let's just finish covering the basics of traffic splines. The traffic splines all have to be up here in a transform group that have these user attributes. Remember, this is your user attribute tab if you don't already have it open. I recommend just keeping it open if you have the screen space. And the traffic, if you are using here, let's switch back to our starter map. Bullet Bill was very nice and has let's see, where is it? What place to store? I thought I saw it in here somewhere. Splines, right there. So if we open up Splines and we look at that, the parent for traffic splines has traffic system dot on create, and then he references the XML data. Okay, so here's another lesson. The pound, or not pound, anytime you see that dollar data sign, that means it is referring to your right here. So I have Steam, so it is in Steam, program files, Steam apps, common, farming simulator, data. And then it is referencing, so data, that's what that $ data means. It means it's a shortcut to where you have the game installed. So the game engine knows to look, okay, I'm going to look for data wherever the person has this game installed. And then maps, map 01. So maps, map 01. Oops, traffic system. I went one level too far. That was all one word. So map01 traffic system .xml right there. That is the file it is referring to. Now, on my map, oh man, this is getting more in depth than what I wanted. Remember, table of contents, if you are not using splines, real quick, this is for editing terrain and some objects. This is not necessarily for traffic, this tutorial. I'm going to cover this more in detail later for the 5th time. But let's go back to my map here. And we will look at, where did I put it? Maps, I think probably same place. Traffic system. Okay, so I'm not gonna go into detail. But what I did was, okay, I'll just show you real quick, just so you know, and then I'll cover. I'm already covering everything. I might as well just cover it all. So if you look here on my traffic spline, I don't have the data because I don't want the game engine going to that traffic file. I want it using my own, because I have a few different things in there. And one of the things I did is, if I look, and so this is Tazewell County, I have it going to traffic system XML. So let's open that up. And I think this is the first time we will be in Notepad++. If you are in a text editor. If you don't have a text editor, I like Notepad++. You can use whatever text editor you want, but you want one that knows XML and Lua and recognizes those. So then it makes all these really nice, indentations. Like if I click on wheels, it automatically highlights, okay, there's the beginning of the argument, there's the end of the argument. You can minimize them. It's a good to have a basic text editor like that. Anyway, what we are doing, what I wanted is because it is referencing vehicles, cars, corpsmen right there. So this XML file, okay, so what happens, right, is the game engine says, where is it? Traffic. Hey, traffic. Go look at here, and that'll tell you some stuff about traffic. And then the game says, okay, well, traffic, what are you telling me about traffic? It is saying, okay, the traffic system, here are all the vehicles on the traffic system. So this would be how you add custom vehicles if you want them running around your map. These all have certain functions. I'm not going to go into them, but what it is saying is ... vehicles, cars, pickup st i3d. So that is the file name for the actual i3d that this is trying to reference. Now, the reason I made it reference mine is because, okay, so the first lesson here, the ... means something. The ... means it goes back one level. So if we are right here, where's the XML? Right there. That's the XML. So we need to go back one level. That's what the ... means. Now we go to, let's pull this off to the side. Now we go to vehicles, cars, pickup st, and I did pull all of these from the default game. So I pulled these all from the data folder. So they're actually the exact same vehicle. However, what I did was, because my traffic's moving at 55 miles an hour, if I want them to stop, I made this traffic collision trigger pretty big. I went to about 3.5. If you want to make a map with traffic going 55 miles an hour, 3.5 works pretty good. Now, you might ask, how do you speed up or slow down traffic? Well, that's a good question, too. So the only thing I did was I copy and pasted some files from that data. And if you're lost, all you have to do is, this is how I figured everything out myself. I went into Goldcrest Valley. Let's go back into Goldcrest Valley just to kind of get it in your head real quick. And again, if you already know all this, you can feel free to jump ahead. But right now, I want you to understand this. So if you look at the Goldcrest Valley, anytime, and this is actually a really good lesson, anytime you have a question about anything, go look at one of the default farming simulator maps. If you forget anything, this is how I learned how to map most of my stuff. Just look at how they did it in Goldcrest Valley and then kind of copy it or change it to your map. So here is their traffic spline system. You see their traffic spline system references the data blah 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 map system XML. And so if you go to their data, I have this as a shortcut. I highly recommend it because you will be using it a lot. Anyway, so if you go into their, where was it? Data, maps, traffic system, XML right here. So they have the exact same file format. You can see that I just kept everything the same on my map for simplicity. So the same example, let's go up one level, and then remember that's what the ... means. You go up one level, not ... just two dots. And then we will go vehicles and cars, corpsmen, and let's click on the corpsmen, and we should see the very basic collision window right there. So you can see that it is a scale of 1. It's kind of small, and there we go. That is the only difference, and that is why I reference. Now, I didn't want to change these, right? Because if I only change these, what's going to happen if I change these, right? And then I export my map and I put it on ModHub. Now my map says, hey, reference the $data sign, right? Well, the problem is it's going to reference that person's local $data folder. And unless they made the exact same changes you made, then those changes are not going to be seen. And that's why you need to change that file extension and then put it somewhere in your game folder. And that's the same with imports and exports. We already kind of covered that with imports and exports in the first or second video. If, you can reference things anywhere on your computer and it might work, but unless it is contained inside your folder here, it's either not going to work right or it's going to use the default game. And in some cases, that's fine. If you look at, again, what Bullet Bill has done on his map, right here, he has set it up so that it references the dollar data. And that's fine if you don't speed up traffic too much. The reason I had to change that collision window is, let's look back here on my Tazewell County map. And let's see. Let's look at Springfield traffic spline. Let's look and see what that one is. So this is one of my Springfield Road traffic splines. I have traffic. I have it set to speed scale of 3. No, let's look at another Springfield Road. I think this is, 3. So 3, if I remember correctly, 3 is roughly 55 miles an hour. If you don't know what this is called a user attribute. Your spline, by default, does not have the user attribute on it. Let's look at, where is it? So right here, let's look at our spline. It does not have this user attribute, right? So if we wanted to add the user attribute, you might go, oh no, what do I do? Which one do I select? Well, don't worry. Remember, anytime you don't know how to do something, go back and look at how the Goldcrest map is put together. However, the map doesn't tell you what attribute it is. In order to see that, open up the actual map in the i3D editor, right? So even though it's an i3D, it will open up in Notepad++ just fine. And then hit Control F for find. And then search for max speed scale. Now, if you have problems finding it, you might have something like match case selected. If I have match case selected and I had a lowercase s there, it's probably not going to find anything. However, if I uncheck that, it will find what I am looking for. Another thing is you can match a whole word only. So if I do something like max speed, it's probably not going to find anything. But if I uncheck that box, now it's going to find max speed, the beginning part of that. That's just a few tricks with Notepad++. And max speed scale, it says that it is a float right there. And that makes sense. If you studied any programming at all, floats are, a Boolean is a 1 or a 0, an integer is a whole number. Floats are, well, I mean, this is basic math too, I guess. Floats are a whole bunch of, like decimal points. And then strings can be numbers in some cases. Anyway, in this case, it is a float. And if we added that, so let's just add that real quick so you can see how it's done. Let's do max speed scale and click add. And now if we set that to 3, then that'll be exactly the same as my traffic in game. However, I just want to warn you, just to finish wrapping this up, I just want to warn you, the reason I had to increase that collision window is because how the traffic works is it only senses the collision. It only starts slowing down if, should we pull it back up real quick? So this car is only going to start slowing down when something enters its path, be it a player vehicle or another car. And that's important to remember because if you set this up to turn, well, what's going to happen? Think about, this is something important. Think about what's going to happen to that vehicle when it turns. Let's say this vehicle is turning left. Well, if it's turning left and there is a vehicle here also turning left, they could intersect each other across the intersection and they might actually stop. Or if this is turning left and you have another car waiting here to go forward, you could potentially have a traffic jam depending on your situations that you set up. And if it crosses the collision, so for example, I don't know, like a sign, I forget if it detects objects or not. But that's something to think about and test out yourself. Anyway, if it sees something and it's turning for a split second, remember it's going to start slowing down, but it's not going to stop. So it might just get a glimpse, slow down briefly, and continue on its way. That's just something you're going to have to test out for yourself. But anyway, that concludes traffic splines. Again, I'm not doing this on my map yet, but I just kind of started covering it, and that's how you cover traffic splines. That's how you do traffic splines on a map, because so I have a separate traffic spline for the straightaway, right? And then I actually have 2 separate splines here. I have one spline for coming, remember it's right hand side American driving. So I have one spline coming from this direction turning, and then I have one spline coming across the intersection here. And that is all connecting to this spline right here. So there's actually 2 splines there. The other one it's merging back there, and they both stop right there. They're just on top of each other and you can't see them. But that's how you do intersections that turn, and the traffic randomly selects between the two. Actually, I'm not sure if it's random or if it's a true one-to-one alternating ratio. Anyway, that's the basics of traffic splines. It has to be a closed loop. One final note, if you go to start up the game, actually two final notes. If you go to start up the game and you don't see any traffic on the map, then that means there is a problem. Check your log. It'll say something like open spline at this coordinate and this coordinate. And you can check those coordinates and go to that coordinate location in the map. A quick trick for that is you can create a new transform group and use that transform group as basically your coordinates on the map. So if it says break in the spline at this location, do Control B. If you're lost a little bit, you can move that transform around and it'll show you, you can use that to basically find what spline it is. Another easy way is I have named my splines. So instead of just saying there's a break in the spline between spline 01 and spline 01, well, I've named them almost all unique names, so at least I have a good idea. If it says a break in the spline at Springfield Road, I know it can only be one of two or three or maybe four different splines, so it's easier to look. Anyway, that should cover traffic, or at least get you started. And the final thing, if you look, where's traffic system? If you look, I have all the splines up there at the top, and then at the very bottom, I have this transform group called parked cars. Now, this is important. The parked cars always has to be at the very end of this spline group. If it is not, if the parked cars is one up, or if the parked cars was all the way at the top, then the parked cars will not work, and I believe I forget if the entire traffic spline won't work or if it's just the parked cars that will not work. But if you're wondering what parked cars are, all they are is a transform group. It doesn't have any user attributes. It's just something called parked cars. And then you have individual transforms inside where, let's hit F to find this. So I have a parked car that will spawn here at Sun Ag. They're kind of an employee over here at Sun Ag. And then, my next one I think is probably right next to them. Yeah, and so then they're facing different directions. And so I believe this one's backed in and this one's forward. I think it faces the blue arrow. It's either that or I have those 180 degrees backwards. Anyway, you can experiment yourself with that. Anyway, let's stop because we are done with traffic splines. Let's go back into, I think we can exit Goldcrest Valley. Always click no for the default map. You never want to save the default map, otherwise you'll never be able to play multiplayer until you reinstall and uninstall. We are done messing with traffic splines. Then we can uncheck that visibility. And let's actually... Okay, so I'm not worried about messing things up in my map because I made a backup. I know I've said it before, but make backups. Make backups of your maps because what I'm going to do next, you especially need to make a backup for. Let's get back into my map here. Okay, here we go. So actually, I don't think I have a recent backup for this map, so I am not practicing what I am preaching. Anyway, let's... All right, I have just created a backup copy and exited out of Giants Editor because you'll need to for the next step. Now, for this next step, this is using two really cool scripts. Actually, it's more than two, but it's two different basic scripts. What you need to do, I'll give you these links, but you want to download this, and then you want to download the Spline Placement version 1.3. You want to download the delete, and then you want to download the create. And you don't need any of those other ones. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to go into the... No, we're not going to go into that. These go inside something called a... Well, so go to C. Here's where my location is. C, users, Flatlander, and then it's typically a hidden folder, so you'll have to do /app data right there. That's what you have to manually enter. Then you look for local, and then Giants Editor 7.1.0, or if you're using a later version, then, or if you're in the future and this is really old, then that's where you want to go. Anyway, let's look in scripts. This is where you want to put those scripts that I just downloaded. I already have mine in there. All you got to do is drag and drop them and then restart Giants Editor. And you will see how amazing these are. So what we want to do is map mods. Remember to make a backup. It's very important to make backups before you do this. let's go into our map and let's start using this. And this is why I taught you about splines. All right, so here's what we are going to use this spline for. I'll just show you what I'm doing and then you'll see the usefulness of it. Let's just drag that spline over here, Control B. And what we want to do is we want to drag the start point right here. So I'm going to press Control B to set the beginning of my spline right there. Now we want to move to the next point. And where do you want the next point in the spline to be? I want this to be somewhere like here. And then the next point, so I'm just pressing the right key, we'll do somewhere over like there. And then the final one, let's put over here because I want you to kind of be over the land. There we go. So now, actually, let's make this a little bit ugly so you can see what not to do. So let's do this. Let's just say I wanted that path. Now, actually, let's do another one and let's do something like this. So now what I want to do is I want to go up here to scripts. I want to do spline placement create. And what that does is it created it under here. Well, that's fine. What I actually want to do is, let's see, I don't want that. So I'm just going to do Control X. And then when I'm not clicking on anything, I'm going to do Control V. So now it is at the same level as that spline because we need to place that spline inside this group. And what that did was it created a transform with two other transforms down. And this script knows how to use these. All we have to do is put what we want to place there, and then it will place the objects here. This is a miracle. Let's grab the train track. Where did I put my train tracks? Oh boy, I forget where. There we go. Train tracks and splines track pack. There we go. Track pack. Let's grab a 10 meter and 10 meter straight. That's what we want to grab. So we're just going to Control C to copy. And let's do Control V to paste. And then the next thing we have to do is we don't want to run the script yet. We have to go to Window. Actually, let's click on the spline placement up there. Let's click on Window and go to Script Editor. So we don't want to run the script yet. We have only done this first. We don't want to go to Execute. We want to go to Window and then Script Editor. And we want to click on the execute script. That's what we want. We've already created it. We don't need to worry about that anymore. We can actually reuse the same creation transform group. So once you have it created, then you don't have to create anymore. And then you don't really have to worry about delete placed objects either. So it's really just this one, execute. Now, here's what you want to look at, the object distance. So what is our object distance? Well, we are using a 10 meter track, so we are 10 meters apart. Everything else you don't have to worry about because they are set to false. The two things that you need to worry about at the bottom is if you want what you're doing to align with terrain, I'm selecting false because I want it to go in the air wherever the spline is at. And then not at terrain, true. Okay, so what we want to do is 10, and now hit save. Anytime you change this, you got to hit save. And then, oh yeah, I never finished my thought. If you're placing trees along a spline, for example, and you want the trees randomly scaled, if you want the trees randomly rotated, if you want the trees randomly placed, so like, at different distances along the spline, then that is some of the stuff you can do. The distance table, I would generally always leave that to false unless you know what you're doing. Just mess with those other things to kind of give you random trees and stuff. And this is an excellent script. Anyway, what we want to do is we already hit save, and now let's hit execute. Now what it did, it took this objects to place and it put them in placed objects. Now let's go look at what we created. This is pretty cool. So you can tell I have a little bit of fine tuning there. I should have lowered the spline maybe a little bit, but the spline that it did create is all the way over here. Now, see, this is why I exaggerated it, because if you curve things too sharp, it's not a magic curve. That's why I showed you Robbie's packs over there, because Robbie's packs, so if you want to do a curve like this, what you would want to do is, here, say we were doing this with a road, right? What you would want to do is you might want to do a couple separate splines. I think it's about a right angle curve, right? So imagine we did this all with roads. I should have grabbed one of my train tracks from my train track pack. But if you were doing this with the road, instead of doing the entire spline at once, if you want a sharp curve in there, kind of make something like that, and then just run the spline script from there to here, and then you can have your pretty, nice, awesome, sharp curve in there, and then run the rest of the spline, from here to over there. As you can see, like, let's go over a gradual curve. It does have, if you zoom in close, it does have a little bit of gap there, so maybe I could do like 9.99 instead of 10 for the distance on the script, but that's pretty close. And, zoomed out, it looks almost, I mean, if you study calculus, it's, it's kind of like you're doing calculus. It's, it's the same principle. If you zoom out, you don't notice that there is, it looks like one continuous curve. It's pretty cool. It's only when you zoom up closer that you see the ugliness, so to speak. So that's why you want to use it for gradual sweeping curves. Over here, for example, I had a different track. Well, you can still see my spline there. It's visible. I did it from right here to, okay, so that's a little bit uglier, but nobody's going to see that. That's why I didn't mind. So like right here, it's a nice gentle sweeping curve. And if you look up close, it looks pretty smooth. I mean, you can't even tell where the pieces are at. Look at that. Let's just run along for a little bit. It's very hard to tell where one piece starts and one piece stops. Now, that is the first part of it. So say I have that laid out where I want. Instead of having to manually raise the terrain, this takes forever. Let's just do a little bit here. So let's raise up a little bit and raise up and up and up, and then, oops, too much. And then sometimes it's easier to raise it over a large and then smooth it over a smaller area. That's one of the easiest ways to do it. So let's raise up over a large area and then smooth. But then that's a problem. What if you don't want to raise up over a large area? Anyway, I would have to do that, and it's tedious, and it takes forever. Or we can just go down here to our spline. Okay, so when you have the track that you like, what I've been doing is I have just been highlighting it all, cutting it, and then creating a new transform group and pasting it somewhere else. So that's what I've been doing. And then I use that, and I have been keeping everything up here under my train track transform group. So there's those other trains that I clicked on, right? There's the track pack, and then there's the other ones nice and organized. And then when I'm done, I'm putting all the splines in there because I'm going to eventually combine them all and use them as a railroad eventually. But for now, here, we'll just leave it there because I'm going to delete all this later. But this is why you want to make a backup, because the next step you cannot go back from. This you can undo. This you could actually, if I wouldn't have moved it, you could actually run the delete placed object script. However, I've moved them because I'm satisfied with it and I'm fine. The point is, here's the tricky thing. One quick note. Remember, when you run this script, do not rename this. The script is actually looking for the term spline, this exact nomenclature. If you have another spline, but it is renamed to like that, or whatever it's renamed to, it will not work. It'll say script not, or it'll say spline not found. And the other note is, in order to run the script, you have to click on the parent transform group. Click on spline placement, because the script is looking for things in this exact order with these exact names. And that is why it is important to, you could, I guess, manually make all these transform groups, but that's what this other script is for. The script spline placement create. That's what that is for. Anyway, now you can leave everything as is. What we want to do is we want to go to spline. We want to click on window and script editor. Now we want to click on train height by spline. Now this one has two major points that I'm going to touch on. Let's just do this by default. Okay, so those are the values that I'm using, and I will show you what I am doing later. So let's hit execute, and you'll see what happens. Sometimes it takes a little while. So let's minimize that script editor, and there we go. So it brought up the terrain exactly to the spline. How awesome is that, guys? This is the biggest time saver that I have found for making a map. It is so huge. It's such a huge good deal, so if that makes sense. Anyway, let's go and experiment around with this a little bit. This is so useful. Let's go into script editor. And oops, I actually had it. Okay, so let's go in the script editor. Now that you see what it does, here's what it does. So the spline, in line 35, this variable, that's the position, that's the distance in meters away from the spline. So if we want it 5 meters higher than the spline, we would change that to 5. If we want it 5 meters lower than the spline, we would move this to a minus. And so if we hit save, now let's see what happens. You can see, because I added that minus, it moved it 5 meters exactly below the spline. And let's change that back to 1 and change that to a plus. And so now it will be 1 meter above the spline. Let's hit save. Remember, you always have to hit save and hit execute. Now it is 1 meter above the spline. And that's fine if you want a really narrow path. You can take the, try some smoothing action. Granted, it's going to smooth it really fast because it is so narrow. But something else you can do is, let's explore this script a little bit more. Let's look at the height position. So let's do something like 0. Let's see. I think I was using something like 0.25, and then we want to make sure that it is a plus. And now the final line that you want to look at is down here. Let's do 25. So this is the distance in meters from the center of the spline going outward. It's just easier to explain. So let's hit execute and see what happens. And come on, depending on what you do, yeah, so it's moving a lot of terrain. It had to think a little bit more. And that is about 0.25 meters, and that's the width. So I just created this monstrosity. Now, if you go out and smooth just a little bit, you can work this terrain and get your track. And then there you go. And look how easy that is. That is so much quicker than trying to drag up the terrain. Oops, I went a little bit too far. Than trying to drag up the terrain to your level. Obviously, this is not really what I'm doing, but that is something that you can do. And then if you think about how awesome this is, so let's do something else with this spline. Let's grab this spline. Let's raise it up so we can see it a little bit better. And let's grab this E. Let's say I want to make another river, okay? Let's go down here and let's do, okay, let's do something a little bit more creative. Let's leave it at this level, and let's do the end of the spline here, and let's delete all those other points except for, oops. Okay, we'll do it again. Let's do the end down there, and let's do the start up there. This is pretty awesome. So let's do a point like right here, and then let's hit insert to do another point, and let's do a point right here, and then actually let's hit insert to do one more point, and go on over to here, because this is kind of what I want to do with my map. Not exactly, but let's say that that's what we want, and let's say that that is going to be our path over to our farm. And what we want to do is, let's refine these a little bit. We still have the spline selected. We can make this at 0, so that's fine. And while spline, okay, so 25. I don't want 25. I want let's try 15. I think that's a little bit better. And then let's hit save and execute. So now we have our path being carved out of the mountain. And this is how I created that terrain path that you saw on over. So it will automatically raise the terrain, and then it automatically lowers the terrain. And, granted, this sharp looks a little bit unrealistic. And, they probably wouldn't cut this path for this little local abandoned farmer. But, a major train highway, they would definitely do that to make the train path easiest as possible, gradual slope as possible, less turns. So they carved through the mountains there. Oh, that looks ugly. I just did this kind of for getting ideas, and I got to change all that later. Anyway, what we are getting at is, if I go back out of here, so now let's say I want to create a road. Well, let's get the road pieces, and I don't know if this is gradual enough. I might have to split it, like that's pretty close to a 90, so I might have to do a 90 curve in there, and then grab, a spline from there to there, and then a spline from there to there. But I'm just showing you in general how it will work. Let's just grab this 5-meter road and cut, and I probably should have duplicated that, but I'm not doing this for saves. So let's delete that. And then I think we are good, right? So let's do spline placement and window and script editor. Oh, we already have the script editor open. Let's do spline placement. No, not create. Would you like to save your changes? Yes, let's save. Let's go to execute, and we want to go down to 5 meters because we have a 5-meter road. So let's hit save. This curve might not look as bad because it's 5 meters instead of 10. Let's just hit execute and see what happens. And there are all of our objects. There is our road. Okay, so it looks a little bit bad. You know what? If we would have placed this at... Okay, so let's run the delete script. Let's just see. I've actually never done this. Let's just hit execute and see what happens. There we go. Easy peasy. So let's hit back on execute and do 4.9. Let's see what that does and hit execute. So that is actually a little bit smoother. We want to go back up to delete and execute, and then go down to execute, and let's do 4.7. Hit save and execute. And that is a little bit better. That looks good. Okay, so let's just call that good. And now we have our nice smooth road. And you can see along a curve, it actually doesn't look too bad at a gradual curve. If you overlap a little bit, you might have some problems in game if you overlap objects exactly. So it'd probably be better to just do a smooth, you know, the very smooth curve, the one-piece curve, and then do it on either end. Anyway, what we're going to do, the goal of this is now, let's say we want to add some trees. Okay, well, you can do, yeah, you can do trees. So let's do something like, where are our trees at? Let's do here, and then let's see, here we go. So I think I actually first need to make my path a little bit wider. So let's make it a little bit wider at 25, and let's make it, yeah. So let's hit save and then execute. Whoops. So right there, it said error. Attempt to perform with is not a nil value. So what did I do? I did something. Oh, that's right, because I don't have the spline selected. So I got to hit spline and then execute, and there we go. And I'm just making it a little bit wider just so I can demonstrate with trees. Okay, so you'll see what I'm doing. So let's go back up to, okay, so it's still thinking. But what we're going to do is we're going to grab a bunch of trees and put them in here. Let's just get rid of that for now. And let's grab, let's see. I don't want a pine tree. Let's grab, where is the thing that I grabbed from Bullet Bill? So let's grab all of these. Let's do a control copy, and then let's go back down to the very bottom, and we actually want to delete all of those. So let's hit spline placement, scripts, and then delete placed object right there. So then we want to objects to place. We want to control V to give us all those trees, and then we want to delete the street. And now we don't want the trees placed on the actual street, right? But we do want the, oh yeah, that's right, the street went bye-bye. We could have left the street. You know what? We should have left the street just so you could see what I'm doing. But anyway, what we would do is we would drag the spline a little bit off to the side. So you can move the entire spline. But remember, when it's around a curve, if you move it to the left, then, you know, you have that to think about as well. So let's move it to the left and back just a little bit. It's probably better to do it in just made like one cardinal direction and then have a turning piece and then doing another cardinal direction. Anyway, what we are doing is we want to go back into our editor, script editor, and oops, we need to click on spline placement. And now here, let's play around with it a little bit. So spline placement, execute. What we want is we want to change use random order true. So random object distance, let's do true. And let's set the default distance at 10 meters. So it will randomly place that 150%. So that's what's that? 5 meters. So between 10 and 5 meters. No, let's do something like 5 meters. Let's line our thing with trees. And now internal Y rotation. Let's see. We want it to rotate around the random Y rotation. True. There we go. Random, and he's got a really good description over there in English, and I think that's German. Random rotation of the y-axis. I believe we want it to rotate around the y-axis, if I am not mistaken. And then let's do random scale. True. Just so we can, let's see, are those, we don't want them too varied. But, so this will scale the height and the size just a smidgen. I don't want them too drastic. So random scale low limit Y. We want to raise that to like 0.8 maybe. I don't want them to be too small. Let's say 0.7. And then the low Z, let's do 0.8's fine there. And then align with terrain. Now we want to select that to true, because we want them to be aligned to the terrain. The road, we wanted the road above the terrain wherever we wanted the road wherever the spline was at. We wanted to force it that direction. Of course, you could select, if you were doing a road now, to make it a little bit nicer, you could try aligning the road or the train track. I can't think the train track to this terrain if you were doing that after you've already made the train. But anyway, I think it's easier to kind of set up your road and tracks first and then align the terrain to that. Anyway, let's hit save and see what happens when we hit execute here. So it has placed us a really dense thicket of trees. And now remember, we drag, even though the spline is lower, let's click on the spline. Even though the spline sits lower, we told it to, right there's the spline. We told them to align to terrain. So if we had this smoothed out and it was a nice little hill, look at that, we have a forest. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Anyway, you can do this with fences. You can do this with, I don't know, any object that you want to use. It's a pretty cool feature. So I highly recommend playing around with that. Oh, and like I said, so there we have our spline. Well, let's grab our spline and let's drag it over to the right side now. And say we wanted to create, I don't know, say we wanted to make this a little bit of a ditch. Let's just see what this happens. And you know what? Another thing is you could use this to create mountains. You could do the, I won't do all these other things. You guys can probably imagine what you can use this for by now. If you can't, then I have failed in my tutorial. But just play around with that. Remember to make a backup copy of your map first. And I wanted to give a special thanks to, let's see, TrackMax, and then also, I think this was a Giants employee. I forget. I'm not sure how to say that name. And then WrinkleysRule brought this to my attention. Real quick, one other thing. If you want a different version, and now I only showed you that version because it's all using the script editor tool, and I think that's a little bit easier. However, if you want to use this guy, Lepis, he has created, or Lepis, I'm not sure how to say it, but he has created a slightly different version where instead of going into the script editor to change those things, he's made them all user attributes. You can use either version, whatever you want. He's got his download right there. I've used both of them. They work fine. I just prefer, since I'm using the script editor anyway for the terrain height, I might as well just use it for everything just so I don't get confused and everything's kind of in one place. Anyway, play around with those. I highly recommend it. It saves so much time, and I really, really hope that helps you guys. Again, I will cover actual placing the roads and the traffic when I am actually doing it on my map. I'm not actually, well, I might not, because I think I covered pretty much everything, but in general, I'm trying to do the tutorials based on what I'm actually doing in the map, but then I kind of just got off on a tangent because since I was already explaining splines, I figured I should at least explain traffic splines as well, and that is something that, yeah, that's just how I did it. Anyway, I hope that tutorial helped you guys. I was originally going to do something else. I wasn't even going to talk about traffic splines, but I kind of just started it. Well, I had to start with splines for those that didn't know anything about splines, and then I just got off on a tangent explaining traffic splines since it was so easy and it was already right there. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Here, you know what? Let's just talk about my map real quick. It has totally changed. Obviously, ignore, none of this is final. I just kind of brought up these mountains so that I could set the scene and give myself some idea of a feeling and what I wanted to do. And well, here's what I wanted to do. So we have the interstate, and you come out of the interstate, and we're going to have a gas station way over here. Yeah, you're going to have to drive a long ways for your gas. It doesn't make sense to put a gas station anywhere else on the map because, there's one on the exit ramp, and then there's another gas station way off the map in this fictional town over here that you can't see because, use your imagination. But that's what this map is going to be. It's off the interstate, and then there's a train yard here, and then there's a larger town over there that people live and work and stuff like that. But nobody lives in this area. It's all mountains and ugly, and then one abandoned farm over on that side. That's what this map is going to be. So because of that, I have to make everything else thematic. Why would this area be abandoned? Why would nobody live here? Well, so you have a gas station there. There isn't a reason to have a gas station anywhere else. And, so you have one there next to the interstate for cars. And then you have all the train tracks here combining. And so this needs to be your sell point for everything. So I'll walk you through real quick. Here's what I kind of envision. I kind of just laid out the terrain and the painting just to give myself an idea for placing stuff. So you're going to walk in here or drive in here. You're going to drive across the scale, right? When you're full and you're going to empty something, you need to weigh the full weight and the empty weight. And then you're going to drive over here. Here's where you're going to unload sugar beets and sweet potatoes. And then it's a mountain map. Sugarcane doesn't really feel right. I don't think I'll make this sugarcane because it won't feel right on an alpine map. That's like the opposite of sugarcane weather. Yeah, so this is going to be a really snowy, this is going to be a cold climate. I'm going to have to look up some, like a cold city somewhere, an alpine city. Anyway, you're going to come across here. So that's where you dump that. And then coming across here, this is where you are going to pull up. And somewhere over here, you're going to dump your wood. So like say right here is going to be your wood sell point. So you can pull up here with a semi and unload wood with the crane here. And then you can also, this will be a functional train track. And that's why I kind of set the crane over there in case you missed it, because you're going to have some logging operations out there, and it'll kind of be like an abandoned train that they just left, and you can use it because the railroad company didn't really care about putting it on another track in service. Since it's so old, it's not really serving a purpose to them. Or we could fictionally say that you bought it for them and leasing the use of their train tracks. Anyway, that's going to be this. And so you're going to offload there. And then this is not going to be used, but this is kind of the fictional area where I'm going to put some train cars here full of wood chips because this is what the little sawmill does. They make wood chips and planks, and then they ship everything off. So this is going to be, this is like a little side alley. So what you're going to do is when you come in with a load of logs, you are going to run over here through this track, and then you're going to run over here, and then you're going to run down here, and then you are going to run over either one of those two. I'm going to put a couple spare cars there probably, and then you're going to run all the way back, and there you go. Now you get a turn around. That's how I'm kind of going to do this loop. I needed to make it a loop to make it enclosed. Otherwise, it won't really work. So that is the direction that you're going to be traveling this train on. Anyway, I think that, let's see, what else? I guess I'll finish here. That's just a little hut. And we have some more huts. So here we go. So one of these will be, I kind of pulled these from the Russian map because they're run down and rusted. And I'm trying to give this the impression that it's an abandoned forest map, right? So it's not used very much. It's not kept up very well. However, they are still operational. And so we'll make like one of these sides corn and soybeans, the other side, all the other cereal crops, something like that. And let's see, none of these other buildings are functional other than like this is going to be their offices where they're working. So I'll have some parked cars there. And then up here is where you are going to have all of your vehicles. So this is going to be the store. This will be the buy point for the store, but then they're going to spawn up here because it'll simulate, hey, they're delivered via train yard. And then we'll put this spinnery or the wool sell point. I'll probably do another platform, and this will be where you sell the wool, kind of simulating, hey, it's getting shipped off by train. And I think that covers everything, all of the points on the map. Yeah, originally I wasn't going to, like, this was supposed to be valleys. This was all supposed to be, if you remember from my original thoughts, I guess there might still be room for a small field there or something, but I don't think it'll fit. I want this to be all forest and unusable space and rocky, because that's just kind of the map that it turned into being. And then I started adding, I wasn't going to have all these trains, but then I was like, hey, trains are cool, so I wanted to add more of these trains. And then it just kind of got chaos. And so this is going to be like a through line. You know, this train is going from off the map over there to the fictional town over there. And then I'm going to have another fictional train going from basically the river over there. He's going to loop along the river and come over here. And then he's going to loop back here. And then he's going to run off the map to this other fictional town. And then you're going to have your own Goldcrest Valley train, or whatever you want to call it, that you control, that it's on this inside track here, that you can run and deliver lumber with. I think I'm only going to have you deliver lumber on the train, just to kind of, I don't know, like, it'd be a pretty huge farm where they would allow you to, like, it'd be a pretty huge farm that would have to be required in order to support you having a train dedicated to deliver grain. I think that's a little fictional. However, it seemed a little bit more reasonable in my head where, hey, you can have an old abandoned train, because this used to be a huge logging operation, and the logging operation will say, you know what, maybe we'll say that you started out the map taking over the logging operation, so you already have the rights to that train from the train company. However, you know, it's just an old abandoned farm out there, so you don't really have any need to haul grain into the elevator. You know, it's not really even possible. Anyway, I think that kind of fits. I don't know. That could change. I might change and deliver, you know, and put a grain elevator over here somewhere, but that just seemed a little unrealistic, because then you would have to have a grain elevator all the way over there just to deliver grain. I don't know. That seemed a little unrealistic. So I think I'll probably just leave it as it is. Anyway, that's kind of the progress update. I have a lot of this finishing off to do. As you can see, it's obviously not how I am leaving the map, but like I say, I like to kind of give the basic impression, the outline first, so I can kind of set the feeling. And like, for example, I knew I wanted a hill there, and, you know, I had to make this, you know, road do that on purpose. And so I basically just kind of filled in the terrain to make it make sense. And this is going to be really rocky. And you know, that's why you can't have an entrance here. You're going to have to go all the way over here. And the entrance to this little section is going to be somewhere. It's going to be somewhere over here along this, or maybe along the train over here. Maybe that's what we'll have you do. Maybe we'll have you enter here, run along the train tracks for a little bit, and then climb down here. And ooh, I kind of like that idea. That's kind of fun. It'll send you along a little rocky mountain adventure, and I think I kind of like that idea. Yeah, that looks kind of fun. And then, yeah, so like I said, originally this was supposed to be one big valley, but I don't know. As I was sculpting the train, it just made a little bit more sense to build it up into a mountain pass. And this is what the map has become. So anyway, I don't even know how much fun this map will be, but I'm having a lot of fun making it, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. It's gonna be a very hard map. You're not gonna have, I don't think you're gonna have any fields to start off with. It's just gonna be some trees, maybe one small field that's run down and half full of lumber or something like that. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun. This is where I've been working on putting the sheep. I showed you a little bit of that. And so I'm trying to give the impression that it's a really rundown farm. I just kind of started laying out the walls. It's going to be somewhat tight spaces, and we're going to do a building there, and then the sheep are going to be over here. So this is maybe where you can store some grass bales, and then the feed troughs are going to be somewhere over there, and then the sheep are going to be, I'm going to level this out, I think. Originally, I put this here from the Russian map because I was going to have you kind of go down gradually as an alternate path and then be able to cross over to your other farm on this side on this rickety bridge. If you wanted to risk it, you know, you could do that, risk falling in the water. But I think that I don't know, I'm still debating on that. I haven't totally decided how I am going to do the sheep area yet. But that concludes the map update. I hope you guys enjoyed this update and tutorial. And the very next thing will be, you know, I'm going to finish doing all this by myself. I don't need to show you that anymore. But it was a huge time saver that I wanted to get it out to you guys as you go around and make your map. So this is the conclusion of this episode. This is going to take me a while to finish getting all this set up and around. And I kind of want to finish off this half of the map as well, so I can kind of get the feeling of the map. And then I'm going to hop on over here and I will put out the tutorial on moving all the animals around and the indexes and, stuff like that, and maybe troubleshooting some errors as well. Because, I don't know, I typically get errors when I move that stuff around because I forget things. But anyway, I hope that covers everything, guys. Thanks again for watching. And until next time, see you guys. Be sure to leave comments below about if I missed anything, if I glossed over minor details that you guys are confused about, or if you want a specific tutorial. If you're waiting, for example, to move your animals around and you don't know how to do it, I could do that now and then just go back to doing that part. I don't have to do it all in order. That's just how I like to do it, and then I'm doing the tutorials as I get there. But if you are stuck on something, then I can jump to that section of the map and start working on that as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more, guys. Thanks again. Bye-bye.